Quotation from myself, segment 24, quotation number 248. Time frightens me, it's running so fast, the deadly certainty, no pause and no delay. The future at once turned into the past, tomorrow's in a flash, becoming yesterday. The desperate attempts to fashion an illusion that time can be reversed or made at least stand still have brought into my life much grief and much confusion, for simple truth is time could not be willed. I have no more hopes, no prayers left to slow the days and years' inexorable flow, till death will break the ruthless clock of time. What shall remain of me then? Few words put in a rhyme. Number 249. Somebody's lines are glasses of wine, like shots of hard liquor are mine. They cannot be sipped and put gently aside. They are drunk in one gulp that will burn your insides. Number 250. Some of the modern poetry resembles also a painter's palette, just covered with the paints of different colors, and which, like many abstract painting, doesn't say much beyond how many distinct colors of various brightness, shade, intensity, etc. are on it. Number 251. Another difference between the classical and modern poetry is that when a classical poet wrote a poem, his work was essentially completed, whereas when a modern poet finished writing his critic job just begins. Now they have to explain and interpret what has been written. Number 252. The multinational state, which can be defined as a state consisting of several distinct national groups, each of which is united historically by the common territory, language and culture, and democracy are, as a recent event in Soviet Union Yugoslavia, to make just a few but most vivid examples, have shown to be incompatible. To begin with, the multinational states are invariably created by military conquest, although sometimes just a mere threat of war would suffice, and consequently held together essentially by military power, no matter how well this fact is disguised by modern treaties and constitutions. In contrast, democracy, in its broadest sense, means the rule by mutual consent of at least the majority of population in any given country, and also depend on the willingness of the dissenting minority to submit to this rule. But such a consent can only be based on broad consensus, which in turn presupposes common interests, either real or imaginary. Yet any modern society is divided into many different socio-economic groups, such as poor, middle class, rich, workers, farmers, city dwellers, and those living in rural areas, etc. Each of these groups is distinguished from another by the set of specific attributes which make it distinct, each having its special interest and its own agenda. The only interest all these divergent groups seem to be having in common are the so-called national interests. For common interests depend on common characteristics, and one which is the most common to the various groups in one nation is their common nationality. But what unites people one nation, common nationality, also separates them from people belonging to another nation, who are respectively united on the basis of their own common nationality, and so on and so forth. Ideologically, such a unity based on common nationality expresses itself as nationalism, in the most benign sense of the word. On the other hand, the absence of such one unifying force, common nationality, in the multinational state, which is by definition made up of several different nations, each with its own nationalism, make the broad consensus of any lasting nature in such a state impossible. Yet to attain its stability and permanence, democracy requires, as a necessary precondition, the widest possible consensus. The objective impossibility of such a consensus, for the reasons stated above, makes, at least in any foreseeable future, the multinational state and democracy incompatible. Postscriptum. Of course, there is objective common interest of the similar classes within different nations, as was expressed in that famous sentence from the Communist Manifesto, "Proletariat of the world unite." But as history has shown, nationalism is much stronger uniting force than class solidarity. It has also shown that those who put the narrow class interests above the broad national ones undermine the national unity and wide social consensus necessary for a successful democracy to function. As a result, they are viewed by society in general as national enemies, for in the long run the idea of proletarian internationalism is as unacceptable to any particular nation as a whole as the idea of capitalist internationalism in the form of multinational corporation, International Monetary Fund, etc. Number 253. Anyone who believes he can persuade people to change their behavior and to become different from what they are, namely better, should first recall the fate of those who have tried to do the same before. Socrates tried to argue the Athenians into changing the way they lived. But as is well known, they hadn't been convinced at all that they should. The Athenians were having a jolly good time being what they were and found Socrates, who prided himself on being gadfly, rather annoying. As a result, finally he shared the same fate as his namesake. Plato was more careful and limited his preaching to the converted, mainly his disciples, the students of the academy. Both of his attempts to convince somebody outside the safe circle, like Tyron of Syracuse, to alter their behavior, had almost ended in tragedy for Plato himself. And if those two examples are not enough to convince anyone to forget about saving mankind and mind his own business, let him think about the fate of Jesus Christ. Number 254. Symbolically, Moses was not allowed to enter the Promised Land. But instead of punishment, this should be considered as an act of mercy on the part of God. The dreamer was spared disappointment of discovery that the Promised Land was not what it has been promised to be, thus beginning the long tradition of creator utopias, safe from disillusionment by their timely deaths. Number 255. Every political system has been, from the times immemorial till now, nothing more than a glorified organization for the distribution of wealth. Or, in other words, different political systems are just different means to achieve one and always the same end: the division between all members of society, what has been produced by laboring segment of it, the division which is invariably not in favor of the latter. Number 256. The infinity of loneliness, the loneliness of infinity. Number 257. Like some collective species in their struggle, not just to survive, but to preserve and perpetuate their privileges, the ruling class of society, through successive generations, have perfected the specific ways of behaving, which, among the other things, help them to maintain the dominant position in the social hierarchy. Thus, the children born in these classes are brought up to emulate this class behavior, both by instructions and by emulation of the adults around them. These children, if they are successful in adopting and mastering such a proper behavior, could be always guarantee the membership and privileges of their class. Number 258. A man can and does a lot of harm to a woman, and a woman, though in somewhat different way, can and does a lot of harm to a man. Yet neither a woman can completely protect herself from a man, nor a man from a woman. Against each other they are defenseless because of their mutual dependency. They need each other to survive. But those in need are always viewed as weak, and those who are considered weak inevitably become the target of abuse. Number 259. I've heard how many books you read, but does it mean they're in your head? Number 260. You throw the world out of the door, but it keeps coming through the window. What is the best way to say goodbye to such annoyance? Simply die. Number 261. Never before in history so many people knew so much, and as a result were so confused and uncertain about everything. Number 264. As the recent and largely unforeseen by the best and the brightest of the political scientists, events in Eastern Europe have shown, it is a spontaneous and disorganized action of masses that in the end create history. And if it is true, then one who wants to know the future should not ask the wise men, but have to look for answer among the ordinary men. For it lies in their feeling, passion, prejudices, miscalculation, etc., which are more true to reality in a sense that they are going to determine the way the reality would eventually unfold. Number 263. The lesson of the Jews as a people with a small territory and big ambition is: make your territory bigger and your ambition smaller. Immigration, that is moving to somebody else's country to live and to prosper, is a wrong and dangerous solution, because the indigenous population will always violently resist the displacement by the newcomers.